KAKU Live. And now here's the man who makes it all possible, Shaggy.
I tell you, man, photo finish today. Yay! I know. Well, welcome everybody to the show. If this is your first time joining us, dear God, let me get ready and prepared for this. You're watching Channel 55, KAKU Blue, and listening on KAKU 88.5 FM, the only simulcast show in Hawaii. Now, today is one of those special occasions. Most of the time, when you have a talk show, you use it to butter up people that you actually want favors for, or if you're a geek like me, you use the show to talk to the people that you actually admire, some of the cool stuff that they've done over their career. And today's guest is one of those people that I admire a lot. As a matter of fact, I admire her so much, she married me. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in the studio is Cindy Paulos.
Now let me explain. Wait a second. We gotta put the lower third graphics on this. I'm a minister and I married you to your wife. I didn't marry you, Shaggy. So
Well,
people will get the wrong impression here. But not that I don't love you. I love you, Shaggy, but not like that.
I know. Right now, my wife's listening, going, "She did what?"
and for all of his friends, the anniversary's coming up in a couple of weeks, August 30th, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Congratulations.
It will be 1 year since we did that whole crazy thing.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was one of those days you don't know if the weather was going to be raining, and I was like, yeah, I remember it very well. It was beautiful.
Oh God, I'm telling you. But let's talk about some very beautiful things, because for years and years and years, you have been the interviewer. As a matter of fact, you've interviewed me a couple of times.
Yes, I have.
I've never had a chance to interview you, nor have I heard anybody interview Cindy Paulos.
It's very much easier to interview someone than to be interviewed.
Well, yeah.
When I walked in the studio here, people didn't see it. I actually sat down in that seat you're sitting in, because I'm just used to sitting in the interviewer seat, not the interviewee seat. So yeah, it's a whole different ball game on this side of the table.
It's funny to me, because you're one of those people that basically did what I like to think that I did. You found your calling very early in life. When would you say, though, because I know you have some really cool stations on your resume, but where would you say was your actual first taste of being the interviewer?
At K-Pot Radio.
K-Pot?
It was called K-Pot.
Joel, you're not supposed to laugh at that.
Yes, those were the days. Those were the days, and that was the least of what we did. But it was K-Pot Radio in Santa Monica, in an apartment that was owned by Jessie Close, who was the sister of the big star Glenn Close. I had a music store on Westwood Boulevard called Paulos Music, and I wonder where that name came from. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she came in one day and wanted a woman DJ on her station she had in her bedroom at home. And I said, well, sure. I mean, the tradition still continues where I don't make money for being on the radio. It started way back then. But as you know that one, how it works well. But, it was one of those things you did in the day for love, and anything would go. And I learned my chops for a year in this bedroom where, she got amazing guests. We had Frank Zappa come in and do regular shows. Flo and Eddie would come in. Randy Newman came in. The Jazz Crusaders would come in. Tim Buckley. I did one of the last interviews with Tim Buckley. And we had this amazing array of people who would just come in and totally free format with no rules, no holds barred. And then the funny thing, after a year, her husband, who actually was a little crazy, and I can say that because he's dead now, but he was really literally crazy, decided he was going to make this free format station called K-Pot into a money-making top 40 station. What? If you know free format stations, that's like a no-no.
Yeah.
You just know, bye-bye, no-no. Mm-hmm. And then I happened to go over to K-Rock Radio. At that time, it was called the Rocks of L.A., which is now a legendary station in L.A.
Oh, the world famous.
Yeah, and that was when a lot of crazy people there, like Jimmy Rabbit and Shadow Stevens, and a lot of amazing people worked there. And I was working for Brother John, I was the public service director for Brother John, who was in charge of public service. And then the people didn't get paid enough, and they all walked out, and I had another job for free.
This is the part that gets me, is because when I started radio, I started it at 17, and it took me forever to get invited into a woman's bedroom. You actually started your radio career by getting invited.
In the bedroom, yes.
Yeah. So once again, Joel, we found somebody more successful than us.
I always came in the back door, so to speak, even at K-Rock, which was in Pasadena at that time. And the stories there, I mean, really, truly are beyond belief. I mean, literally, there were different owners of the station, and they would get in fights. One time, I had to lock myself in the studio where the different owners were battling for control, and literally got in a fist fight, and it went down. I mean, it was like the wildest movie you can imagine. They were battling, and they fought down the stairway into a trash dump down below, and I was locked in the studio and told, don't open the door no matter what. Just keep yourself locked in the studio.
Yeah, I guess you should be lucky that instead of working, that when you were working at K-Pot, it's a lot better that you weren't working at K-Kane, because I heard that that's a really upbeat station.
I never heard it. Are you joking about this K-Kane? Is there a K-Kane?
Of course I am, but Joel believes every word that we say.
Too, but no, it was a wild beginning, but rock and roll was wild. This was the early days of rock and roll, where literally you'd play everything. I mean, there were no rules. We'd do reggae to jazz to cuts that were 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then everyone would stop in at K-Rock. I mean, I got to interview everyone, and you get to meet everyone, of course, and the parties at that time were legendary, very legendary.
This is the thing that gets me, because that era of music and that era of radio, when us kids in the 80s and 90s were coming up, that to us was the golden era, the birth of rock radio as a format.
I was the first person to play Devo on the air.
Wow.
I was. I mean, this was like crazy. And they came down. I interviewed them. They gave me, I wish I still had a little plastic red hat and one of those Devo outfits made out of paper. But no, it was insane, I mean, truly, truly crazy. But at the time, of course, no money. But, and then, of course, I was the person who turned it off the air eventually, because after the union came in and said, listen, no one's getting paid. And it's like, yeah, well, that's radio. But finally it got shut off. And I went over to KMET and then to K West, where I met John Detz, because he was the general manager over there at KWST Radio. And they actually paid people there. Not much. I mean, not much. No, wait, don't get the wrong. My first paycheck was $37 a week, but that was a lot better than what I was getting before.
Yeah.
And I worked briefly at KMET for Shadow. The first day of my job there was Halloween, and Ace, he was a great news guy, a legendary news guy in LA. He was wearing a giant penis outfit. I think I can say penis on the air, right?
Yeah, sure. You'll give my director a heart attack.
He was dressed as a giant penis, and then he stuck out his hand of sorts to shake my hands, and I just didn't quite know what to do. I've never shook hands with a penis like that before. And that was my first day. And then my second day, they fired Dr. Domino, and I was the assistant to the program director, and I had to answer all the calls of people who were furious about the firing of Dr. Domino. And literally bags of mail came in, bags and bags of people threatening everything because Dr. Domino was fired by the program director. I was working as the assistant to. So I didn't stay there long, although that was a great crew of people as well, legendary station.
It sounds like you left there under the witness protection program.
Yeah, it was pretty close. It was insane times, and that was good though, and I went to K West and got a job in public service department and did my first interview reel shows that were paid for, called Insight, where I was having a chance to interview some really great names and all kinds of great names in rock and roll.
Now, here's the thing. You went from being a rock and roll personality, and I mean, pick stations, K-Rock, but then now you've evolved into a talk show persona. These are two different types of delivery, and I've always wanted to know, because, me, young buck in the industry.
Are you a young buck?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm a middle-aged buck.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, but do you think that there is a certain level that you reach when you do music radio that you're just like, God, I feel like I want to do more, and you go into talk? Or can I present this argument? Because the free-form radio and the way that you did things in the 80s and 90s, we all know that corporations started coming late 80s,
Absolutely.
90s. It all ballooned up. And freedoms and creativeness of the whole industry got squished down next to nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, in 1979, and I am dating myself, John and I went, after I went to K-Rock back a second time, I did the morning shows there for a while, I heard about through the DJs there, a station for sale in Northern California called KVRE. And we just decided to actually start our own chain of stations, doing it like the way we wanted. Mm-hmm. And John has a tendency to buy radio stations. If you know John, he has this addiction. It's a terrible addiction of buying radio stations. So we went to Northern California, totally free format, wonderful, legendary station, KVRE, and loved it. Then more stations followed, as is John's tendency. I think we landed up with 6 or 7 there, all over Northern California and Seattle. Oh, no, it was Portland. And after a while, you know, I came over here to, because it was getting tighter, I came to Maui, worked at KAOI Radio in 1986, loved it, but I only did sales because they already had on-the-air people. Went back to Northern California and then found out a little while later that KOI was for sale when Roger Whiteside owned it. And John, again, knowing John's tendency to loving to buy radio stations, I told him and he came over and bought KOI Radio. And that was free format. In the beginning, it was great, live. But to answer your question, rock and roll's still fine, but truthfully, you do have, just like this, we couldn't do this with music right now on the radio. This, as you know, if you were doing a break, you want to talk at the most 3 minutes?
At the most.
Maybe 4 on the morning show, maybe 5 or 6. But
yeah, but that's career suicide past 5.
You could not do this on the radio like you could in the old days. I mean, so yes, talk radio gives you a freedom, especially in this kind of format here. I mean, still in LA and lots of other places, you might be limited here unless you had super big numbers and you were a big name. But yes, for this, I love this, you know. And I have done a KAKU I've worked with for 20 years, and I love this format that now you're able to do radio and TV. In fact, this is the first time in my life I've really done radio and TV at the same time. I've done TV here, I've done radio, but isn't this wonderful that you can do radio and TV?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Over the years, I had imagined that the technology that you started off with and the stuff that we work with today are universes apart. And there was a time that radio stations, they really didn't care what you look like, as long as you sounded good.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean, it was not a job requirement to look great unless you were the female on the staff.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Then you were the token female and had to, I mean, I won't say who said this before, but I'm literally, people would go on the station, and I've heard some of the DJs say, that woman, my God, did you see the way she looked? She'd be a great DJ. Honest to God, I mean, that was the criteria, you know. How short was your skirt, you know, et cetera. Because there was sexism. Sexism was predominant in the early days of rock and roll.
Yeah,
it really was.
And that's the thing, too, is because when we do outreaches, when we talk to people in the community, they're always like, oh, this is such a cool job. There's this little part of me that always dies inside when I think about how do I tell them about the inequality in the entertainment world.
Oh, it is. I mean, it still is. If you even look in even the movie business, how few women are in control versus men. In the entertainment business, it's always been run by men, and and you look at how many general managers are females versus. It's gotten better over the years, but it has not been an easy ride. I mean, I don't even want to say on the air what I had to put up with in some places because you were the token female, you know. But no, it's gotten better, and now, you know, we have on KNUQ-FM, there's me midday and Penny Lane in the afternoon. That would be unheard of. In the old days of radio, you'd never have two females back to backs, literally. You know,
not during the week even.
No.
You would have one girl on the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, back at KMET, there was Mary Turner at KMET. Was a token female, and at K-West, Alexia was the female. It was one, and I was doing the talk part. So no, yeah, but there was typically one female at that time on. So, you know, we've gotten a little better, you know, but it's not been an easy haul. In those days, some stations, radio stations that were rock and roll station, would allow one female artist an hour to be played. Just one female artist in an hour to be played. And that's progressive radio.
Yeah. Hey, honest question time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever think, I'm just going to go to work today with an AK and a gas can and level the playing field?
No, you know what? I like to get even by the long run, by surviving in the long run. And, I've survived a lot of people coming and going over the years, I've been in it for the long haul, many, many years. I'm coming up on 40 years in broadcasting. I'm a dinosaur, but I can still roar,
Hey, just because the tiger's getting up in ears don't mean the teeth got dull.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that has always intrigued me about your era of starting out in radio versus what I started out with, because, by the time I got there, the sexism was still there. The inequality was definitely there. I mean, the running joke is, what do you have interns for? Where the boys do all the grunt work and the girls are there to date.
There is still some truth in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really sad, though.
Yes.
I mean, there's sometimes that I just go home and I cry over our industry.
Yeah.
But when you started with the birth of rock and roll radio, because that's essentially the era that you started developing prominence, was there ever a time when you were interviewing somebody that you actually knew, dear God, I'm a witness to history right now?
A couple of times, yes. I mean, I did the first interview with Eddie Money and the Ramones, and there were many people that you'd see, and you just know that person was going to, be big. They had talent that you could sense in them that was just massive. In the early days of rock and roll, there wasn't the money that there was a few years later. I mean, when the record companies got wind to how much money some of these people could make, it all changed, But in the early days, no. I mean, a lot of these people didn't really know, and some of them weren't getting the money, even though they were big, because their managers were getting the money, and they were still getting very little compared, because they didn't know enough to have a good manager or a good lawyer, and it's very different now. You don't become big unless you have you don't even talk. You talk to the lawyer. You don't talk to the artist, right? But yeah, there were many moments that it was kind of historic. I was doing promotions for K West, and we did the premiere of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, wow.
And talk about a moment where you go, wow, walking out of that movie, and the stars were there, and it was in Westwood, and it's like, wow, everyone's mouth was dropping open. We did the premiere of Star Wars. I did to a special screening where George Lucas was there, and he apologized at the end for Star Wars, but you could tell, I mean, it was like, wow. Yes, with movies and with people, that was the cutting edge of a lot of things happening, and we got sometimes to experience Bruce Springsteen at the Roxy.
Oh, wow.
We broadcast live when he did Born to Run, that release, that very, very big release. We broadcast live at the Roxy with, a very small club on Sunset Boulevard. That's history-making stuff, yeah.
That was 1978, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think that was.
That was as a matter of fact, Born to Run is what made him a national celebrity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys got access to this first.
Yep.
It's always shocking to me when we hear about, like, that time period. As much as we look at it now and we think, oh man, wasn't it great? There was literally news happening every second in the rock world back then.
Oh yeah, and there was so much money, and the parties they did at that time were mind-blowing. I mean, when Paul McCartney came out with, I think it was Band on the Run or one of them, he actually rented out the Queen Mary. I mean, yeah, he rented out the Queen Mary for the party, and everyone, was brought down there in limos. And I can't even tell you the parties and backstage passes and the amount of restaurants you got to go to. That were unbelievable. They don't do that anymore. But at that time, they were throwing a lot of money at the industry, and there was tons of drugs, and there was tons of everything, and it was insane. And it really wasn't a healthy lifestyle. It really wasn't a healthy lifestyle. It was excess city. It was in Hollywood especially. It's a center of excess city. Yeah.
God, did you ever want to hit the brakes and be like, I got to get out of this town?
Well, I did. I mean, I lived up in Topanga. I lived out, and I go up and walking in the hills, and I had a horse riding in the hills, and I absolutely would. I mean, I always had that other side, and at this time, I was also a minister. At the age of 17, I was a minister, so I always had meditation in my own private time. For a while, 3 years, I house sit for Henry Fonda, because I knew Shirley and Henry, and she wanted my discount I had at a clothing store years ago because she was a clothes addict. So I had my own place at Henry and Shirley's for 3 years in Bel Air. And, that was pretty nice because it was 6 acres in Bel Air, So, I could retreat, easily. And I do. I retreat in meditation. I retreat in writing. I write every morning after I meditate. And it, really can keep you sane. I know yesterday you did a piece on insanity. And that lifestyle that people like Robin Williams and others have gone through is not a healthy lifestyle. I mean, no one would say, if you want to be healthy and happy, become a huge star. I mean, this is, it's a dancing with the devil kind of situation, because you're given so much accolades, and you're giving anything you want, and you're given drugs at every turn, and there's just too much around. It's do or die for a lot of them. And, thank God a lot of artists like Eric Clapton, and the list goes on Steven Tyler, yada, yada, all had to go through rehab and pull themselves out. A lot of the people I knew did not make it, A lot of people have died along the way. It's a life and death bargain you're making for that kind of stardom. And some make it and some don't. When they know, I mean, you go into this business, you see people dropping, so you know what you're up against.
God, so, I mean, being a minister, I think at this point you would probably go to work with every little protection that you could being in this environment, right?
Well, I came up with a term a long time ago called divine rationalizations. I mean, it is easy, if you're really tuned into yourself and God and your own inner spiritual strength, to say it's all Maya, it's a dream, it's a learning game. But, where do you stop? I mean, where do you cross the line and say, yeah, it's a learning game, but this really isn't a healthy learning game, And I think that can happen to a lot of people in the business because, they're doing things and everyone's telling them they're great, especially these rock and roll stars and movie stars. But you have to have a really strong enough inner voice to go, this is not really going to be working right for me. And how do you stop? If you're someone like Robin Williams, how do you stop? I don't know. If you get in so deep, it's really hard to stop and go to rehab. And how many times do you have to go to rehab to really finally make it? How many times do people were just about to go to rehab or just came out of rehab and didn't make it? And the list is endless of Jerry Garcia, yada, 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 yada. Jimmy, a lot of that is you're just not strong enough. And the people who feel a lot, like Robin Williams, I think really did, who are really, really sensitive, they have a harder time. They have a harder time than the people who are thick-skinned and who don't really care. It's the sensitive people who are sensitive and really feel things that take it harder, that sometimes don't survive, unfortunately. Janis Joplin really sang great blues, but she really was, take another piece of my heart, baby. Well, after a while, they took the last piece of her heart,
Yeah.
and there she went, I mean, that is what happens to some of these people.
God, and that's the weirdest part that I have to take a stop on ever on this show. We have to take a break right now, but I'm just like, can we just skip? No, we cannot
Yes,
skip these breaks. All right. Well, I tell you what, we'll want to come back, and I want to talk about inner voices, especially inner voices as it pertains to some of the stuff that you've wrote about.
Okay.
And how to find these and find the right ones. All right. For everybody else that's joining us, well, get ready for it, because what we're going to do is take a short break, come back, and we'll talk more with my guest, Cindy Paulos, and find out about some of her new projects. Oh, also, in just a little bit, we'll have a brand new How Dumb Is America. Right now, though, we got to take a little pause. Chivo's got your news, and of course, our very own, very lovely Sarah Rodriguez has the radar. We'll be back in just a second on 88.5 FM and Channel 55. Hit it, Joe!
Hi, I'm Sarah Rodriguez with On the Radar. A TV news crew out of DC that set out to determine whether a local neighborhood was indeed as sketchy as a new app suggested ended up becoming crime victims. As a three-person crew from WUSA TV interviewed the residents of the Pentworth neighborhood to see how they felt about the sketchy designation, they weren't thrilled. Someone busted into the parked van and stole most of their gear. The thieves also stole one crew member's purse, and she was able to track it to a nearby dumpster where her phone was inside. As for the app, the crew didn't name it, but Business Insiders say it sounds like a new one called Sketch Factor. The idea is to give users a sense of particular neighborhood's sketchiness factor, and it's not sitting well with critics. At Valley Wag, for instance, Sam Biddle calls it racist because it's all about helping white people avoid black neighborhoods. Sketchy, he adds, is the term young white people use to describe places where they don't feel safe because they watched all 5 seasons of The Wire. It's the kind of story that almost has to come with a Portland Dateline. It seems that on Monday evening, a concerned citizen called Portland's non-emergency line to report a chicken crossing the road. Prefacing his concern with, "Hi, this is actually not a prank call," the man proceeded to inform dispatch of the chicken, resulting in this conversation as per the Oregonian. Dispatcher: "Is it causing traffic problems?" Concerned citizen: "Yes, it's really trying to go into the middle of the road." Dispatcher: Yeah, is it just the one chicken?" Concerned citizen: "Just one chicken, yeah." Dispatcher: "And are people almost crashing because of it?" Or concerned citizen: "I had to slow down to almost a complete stop." Unfortunately, responding officers saw no sign of the offending chicken, thus leading police rep to tell the AP that police, wait for it, were unable to determine the chicken's intent. Archaeologists in Greece are nearly ready to enter what they say is the biggest ancient tomb ever unearthed in the country. The tomb at the ancient site of Amphipolis in the Macedonia region, around 65 miles northeast of Thessaloniki, dates from around 300 BC, the time of Alexander the Great. Though experts don't believe it belongs to the warrior king who died in what is now Iraq, the Telegraph reports, 2 carved sphinxes flank the entrance to the tomb, which is surrounded by a 540-yard marble outer wall. It looks like the tomb of a prominent Macedonian of that era, a culture ministry official tells Reuters. Archaeologists have spent the last couple years excavating the ancient burial mound under which the tomb was found, and they plan to enter the tomb within the next 2 weeks, reports NBC, which adds that there is one clue to its possible occupant. Researchers believe a 16-foot stone lion unearthed in the area a century ago and associated with Laomedon of Mytilene, one of the Alexander the Great's military commanders, once stood atop the tomb. And that's what's on the radar with Sarah Rodriguez.
Colleen Hanabusa has filed an injunction to stop this Friday's special election at Keonepoko Elementary School on the Big Island, held for the 2 polling places whose election was postponed due to Hurricane Iselle. Hanabusa feels it's unclear how thousands of voters will find out in time to cast ballots. The sprawling Puna district could provide the deciding votes in a tight U.S. Senate race between Senator Brian Schatz and Representative Colleen Hanabusa. The Democratic primary was too close to call after officials tallied votes over the weekend. Office of Elections spokesman Rex Cadilla said officials are sending letters and relying on the local county clerk to make voters aware. The county clerk's office is putting up banners, handing out flyers to school children to tell their parents about the vote. Officials of the State Department of Transportation have announced that the next phase of the Lahaina Bypass project will build the roadway farther south, extending it from Hokiokio Place to a southern terminus somewhere near the former Olawalu landfill. The department has appropriated $30 million for construction of this 3rd phase of the bypass project in its draft statewide transportation improvement program, which outlines roadway projects for the department to implement in the next 4 years. The southern portion of the bypass is not slated to begin construction until 2018. Former Maui County Solid Waste Division Chief Tracy Takamine is appealing a decision upholding disciplinary action that led to his firing last year, alleging that an investigation by the county was improper and unfair. In the appeal filed August 1st in Second Circuit Court, Takamine is asking the court to reverse an order by the Maui County Civil Service Commission, which denied his appeal of disciplinary action. The court action alleges that the commission erroneously concluded that Takamine violated the county's Violence in the Workplace Action Plan in supervising an employee who had been fired before being allowed to return to work under a last chance settlement agreement. Maui police said bail was set at $1,000 for a man charged with assaulting another man in Kihei this past Sunday. 34-year-old Valentino Gutierrez gave no local address and was charged with second-degree assault. A presentation by Steve Blake will take place tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Cameron Center in Wailuku. Attendees will learn how to defeat diabetes with diet and lifestyle changes. Maui Youth and Family Services will present an exclusive screening of the critically acclaimed movie Short Term 12 by Maui-born and raised filmmaker Destin Daniel Cretton. That's going to be on August 15th at the Iao Theater in Wailuku. The evening also includes a performance by singer-songwriter Steve Zuala. This event starts at 6 p.m. with doors opening at around 5:30 p.m. Centering around a foster care facility, Short Term 12 won both the Audience and Grand Jury Awards at the 2013 South by Southwest Film Festival and the top award for Narrative Feature Drama at the 2013 Maui Film Festival. Maui weather, sunny skies for what remains of our Wednesday. Highs today near 80 with northeasterly winds at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Partly cloudy with isolated showers tonight with lows near 70. Mostly sunny skies once again tomorrow with winds out of the east at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And that's your Wednesday KAKU News Break. I'm Chivo Cheng Johnson.
88.5 FM, and of course, you know where else. It is Channel 55 KAKU Blue. Joining me back in the studio is, of course, our very lovely guest who has went through some crazy stuff.
Yes, indeed.
I didn't even know that.
It's all pretty wild, yes.
It's Cindy Paulos, and before we left off for the break, we were talking about how everybody has inner voices, some pushing them into the direction of good, some pushing them into the directions of bad and excess. And this is kind of, dare I say, your area of expertise.
Well, it's been my passion, really. For me, it's the most important thing in my life. And I started after my father died, really exploring life after death, because my father died at a young age. And then I found out that he came to my mother in spirit and kissed her on the forehead 3 days after he died and said, "There is a forever," which began her exploration of metaphysics. And I started at a very young age going to classes with her. So I started meditating every day of my life. I began at 13, and I loved it. I mean, I just read everything I could about it in the beginning. I really wanted to understand about the higher realms and the inner self and God, you know. And so that was when I found out through meditation you could really connect with your soul and with God. I thought, wow, how cool is that, you know? I mean, really, what a great high, you know?
Yeah, and it had to be odd for you because here you are coming into this spiritual awakening around, dare I say, a bunch of heathens in the radio world.
Well, it was before even. I was in Beverly Hills school system. I mean, I had an enlightenment experience at the age of 15, and I was writing in Beverly Hills schools. You know, I was reading, reviewing Alan Watts, you know, The Joyous Cosmology, and my teachers were kind of getting very upset with me. Are you proselytizing a new religion here? Going, no, this has been talked about for years with the mystics, and Rumi and people have known about this for ages. This isn't really new. I mean, this is what Christ and Paul and all the people have had these, you know, experiences. It's universal, you know, but it's not really what most of the kids in Beverly Hills High School were interested in.
You know, I mean, they had visions, but it usually took acid to get them.
Well, yes, and well, no, actually, that time when I was there, this is before acid.
Oh,
yeah, no, I mean, and even marijuana wasn't popular back then, way back then. A couple years later it took off, yeah. But no, this was when, this was still on that edge, where it was not really at all hip at all. And so that was a little later,
Well, this is because if I'm thinking correctly, you're talking about the time period of early 70s?
No, this is 65.
65. Oh, I was about to say,
65.
Was this around the national transcendental movement that happened in the late 60s?
Just before.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was on the cutting edge of that, before that, getting involved in the early days before that, yeah. And it was pretty interesting. I mean, everyone says, oh, you were a hippie. No, I was not a hippie. I was in Beverly Hills, and I was around a lot of wealthy areas, and I certainly wasn't a hippie, but I certainly believed in the principles that a lot of the people that were hippies took that to. Mm-hmm. And it was really, for me, enlightenment. It was all about enlightenment, and when you have enlightenment, it's about really serving, and it's really about walking your talk. It's really not about tuning in, as far as I could, in my way. It wasn't about tuning in, dropping out. It wasn't tuning in, turning on, and dropping out. It was tuning in, figuring out the best way you could be the best you could be to really help and serve, and living that, not just talking it, but really walking your talk. And that was difficult, but it was easier in the rock and roll lifestyle than it would have been working for some corporate area. I never could have structured myself to work like that in a corporate. Thank God. Thank God I couldn't have gone that far.
But now you read stories, especially from places like Forbes magazine, that the top 10 companies on the Fortune 500, those CEOs practice some form of transcendental meditation.
Yes, absolutely. And because it works. Because all of those people realize that it's effective, and it reduces stress, and it brings you peace of mind, and it makes you more effective as a worker. If you're really doing it, if you're really trying your hardest to be the best you can, you work well. You work as hard as you can. You show up on time. You do the best job you can, because it's the right thing to do. In Hawaiian words, it's pono. You try to be pono,
Mm-hmm. So when you were first coming on to meditation and first trying to discover the inner balance, what is it that put you in the mindset that said, you know what, this is the time I really need to try meditation? What was it that led you down to this path of wanting enlightenment in the beginning?
Well, when my father died and I went to these classes, I learned to meditate. And again, I was 13 or 14 years old. Mm-hmm. And when for me, it was literally like plugging into a power outage, a power supply that just lit me up. For me, it was like, phew, this is it. It was immediate that I was in tune with that inner self, and my inner self and my soul I got in contact with, and through the soul you can contact God and the higher realms. And yeah, that for me was very exciting. I immediately loved it. And so I was meditating, and I still do. I have meditated every day of my life. And my form of, to the places that I could reach, and to bridge them and to come back, because there is a different place of energy you are when you can go into deep realms of meditation. My way of bridging that and bringing it back to the heavier realms, or the earthly realms, was to write it. To write it down, and to write what I was experiencing that. So I every day write after I meditate, and I have literally probably over 10,000, I call them messages rather than poems, that I've written down over the years. Obviously this is before computers, so a lot of them have been totally lost, or I have journals. I can't even tell you how many stacks of journals are. Some are really moldy, and but yeah, there's stacks of them, So at some point in your life you try to get them organized, and I have now a lot on computer, and I have thousands on the blog site. But I did a book. My first book was Put a Little Light in Your Life, a guide to sending and receiving positive energy, which is kind of like... You can actually
hold it up to the camera if you like. Yeah,
which camera?
This one right here. This is your camera.
This is my camera. Camera A. Hi, Camera A. How are you? Nice to meet you.
So put a little light in your life.
Put a little light. See that light? This is your light. And the idea behind this was that, and this is what Reiki really does, but Reiki's kind of for healing. This is using light in all aspects of your life, for everything. if you've suffered the loss of a loved one, or if you are stressed out, or if you're depressed, or anything. I mean, everything, and it's covered in here. I mean, I have hundreds of ways you can use with messages, actual exercises with messages that you can use to help give yourself. Here's using light in communication. I just opened up for you. Using light in communication. Isn't that synchronistic, right?
Yeah, exactly, because we
All
use a lot of lights
communication is
in here.
based on exchanging and sharing energy. Yes. I actually see, if you look at the word communication, it's commune, right? And
That's a collective.
We are communing, right? And when you use light and love in your communication, the exchange of energy takes on a whole new dimension. And I believe that. You work with that all the time, right? You know how to use energy when you're talking to someone, right?
You automatically, it's so weird, because something that we do in this industry as a function of our job, we don't know is actually a little spiritual.
Oh,
when you
absolutely
open
it is.
yourself up to be receptive to somebody else's ideas and feelings, and the process that we go through mentally, being an interviewer, is almost, would you say, the same process that you would approach mentally meditation of
Yes.
opening yourself.
Well, you're exposing yourself on the air right now. You know that.
Oh my God. Joel, call the censors.
You have, if you're going to really be effective in communicating, you have to be willing to be courageous and really expressing some of your inner thoughts. You do this all the time. You've done it. I saw you at Q103. You always would take your thoughts and then throw it out there and let people bounce off. And you weren't afraid of what, people think this is stupid. You weren't. And some people wouldn't. I'm not going to tell people I'm thinking this, or it takes a lot of courage to do that. But communication, especially in what you're doing, is, definitely a form of this, and that's why I think I love radio, because, I think people can tell a lot about you by your voice. I really think they can. They can tell if you're telling the truth. I think your voice really does carry energy that people can tell if you're BSing them, or if you're not, or if you're telling the truth, I think that your voice carries that power. I think it's easier to fool people with your looks.
Really?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. You can fool people with your looks easier. That's why I first loved radio, because radio would literally, you're talking from your inner self. This is your inner mind. It's like you're talking to someone on the phone, kind of. But
do you remember the old technique where they would tell you to envision who you would like to be on the mic?
I never did that. I just was always just me. I know when I started in radio, they wanted to be me to be the sexy broad, and I know. I'm never. No, I'm just going to talk like I normally talk, and I'm going to use, and I've always used my own name on the radio. Yes, this is my real name, Cindy Paulos. It's not a air name, and I've always just used that. Although that was always popular to change your name and and do all that.
So says the guy named Shaggy.
Yeah, right. I still, when I write you checks or birthday cards, I go, what's your name again? I won't say it, but I still think of you as Shaggy. What is your name? You've become Shaggy. There's some kind of metamorphosis there. But anyway, that was the one. And then my mother passed away after I wrote this book, and it was interesting. After she passed away, I always get these things I've written down, but I'd never gotten songs before. And she loved music. She would sing when she was washing the dishes at night with 5 kids and a dysfunctional, dementia-ridden grandmother and all kinds of problems, and she would sing, and I loved that. I knew singing made you feel better. We'd sing as a group, going horseback riding in the hills. We'd sing, the hills are alive with the sound of music. We always felt good, kind of like your puppy thing you did, versus the depression. There'd be the depression going on with dementia in the household, and yet we'd be singing the hills are alive with the sound of music.
Yeah.
And I like that feeling, right? So I always loved music, and so after she passed away, I started getting these songs coming to me. And, and definitely messages that, one I wrote called Beside Still Waters I Walk, which was definitely an inspiring message that was from her, that she was great, And so I did a CD, There Is a Forever, based on, again, what was
her father said.
Yes, exactly. And it's actually on the plaque that we have at the Forest Lawn Park in Glendale. Says There Is a Forever. So that was the first CD. And then after 20 years here on Maui, I decided to do a CD anniversary of 20 years called Practicing Aloha, and I called in favors from some of my friends like George Kalmoko and Eric Gilliam and Marty Dredd.
A couple of Grammy winners,
Yes,
no big deal.
And some great people on this, and I also had a lot of great musicians help out, and they were on that one. And Clifford Naola even does a chant at the beginning, which is kind of cool. And I had some wonderful, Hutchinson played bass on it, and Lenny Castellanos was on it. And, of course, Fulton Tashambi helped me on that, and he does a few wonderful tracks. So that was really cool to do that. And it was Practicing Aloha was the title track, and that was cool. And then, it's like, what next? Well, I love to travel.
Mm-hmm.
I love to travel. And I've been seeing ever since 9/11 people getting absolutely crazy. I mean, really, really crazy in the airports, and I mean, freaking out,
Yeah, just a little
freaking dangerously freaking out. So, I mean, I really am one of these long flights back from Italy when I saw someone freaking out in line. I think I got to write a book and take these principles that I've been using all my life, and most of us, as you say, the CEOs, and put that to practice for flying to reduce the stress. Use meditation, use your breathing, use all these wonderful principles you can, that you can learn and have been taught over the years. And it's in the book,
The Travel Angel Handbook.
Travel Angel Handbook, a guide to reduce the stress of air travel.
Well, you know what? We've got to do this again.
I've
got to take a break.
I could see Joel waving his hands. That was kind of a clue in the other. He's just. I thought he was doing hallelujah. Actually, I thought he was calling and Godding, and his hands raised. I thought I converted him or something, but no, either that or a break.
Actually, sometimes I think he's having attacks behind me. Help!
Right.
All right. Well, I tell you what, we'll get ready here. Take a quick break for everybody watching at home. Come back with more of our guests. And, well, we've definitely got to let you know how to learn more, because I don't think we're going to squeeze it in on a one video interview. All right. So, real quick, this is a new segment, How Dumb is America? And then we'll be right back here on Channel 55 and 88.5 FM. Hit 'em, Joe! Hey, it's Shaggy, and welcome back to another edition of our quest into dumbness. Now today, we learn a valuable lesson in being careful what you wish for when it comes to protective laws. Now, you've all heard the expression, right? There ought to be a law. Well, here's proof that mentality might actually be helping America make some pretty dumb decisions. To start off with, we'll do a little definition here, as the term protective laws could mean anything from trade regulations, such as tax shields, and even the right to use force without fear of legal repercussion. Like, Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Now, in the context I'm using it means a law that someone had proposed or made for the common good. Let's start with a common sense law that many still object to. It's the controversial Brady Law. Signed into effect November 30th, 1993, the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act requires anyone purchasing a handgun be run through a federal background check before being able to buy that gun. Now, opponents of this law says that it infringes on their Second Amendment rights. But let's see real quick what this law states when it comes to who should not be allowed to own guns. Well, that list includes people like fugitives from justice, an illegal alien or someone illegally in the U.S., convicted unlawful users of drugs, or persons shown to be addicted to controlled substances. And of course, people convicted of domestic violence. Now, those sound exactly like the types of people you wouldn't want to own a small weapon capable of killing at a distance, right? Now, the problem is that this law also contains a restriction on people dishonorably discharged from the military, with no clear definition on the reasoning behind discharge being a factor in future gun ownership. Now, as flawed as something like not knowing intent sounds, you have to remember that criminal courts and military courts function differently. So for the most part, the Brady Law helped curtail some gun violence, and thus can be called a good decision protective law. Now, the Brady Law is named after John Brady, who was injured when John Hinckley Jr. tried to assassinate then-President Ronald Reagan on March 30th, 1981. In a bid to impress child actress Jodie Foster into loving him? Look, I'm not sure what kind of girl would like a presidential assassin, but this show isn't called Great Ideas from Guys Trying to Impress Girls, now is it? All right, let's switch gears and talk about a time in America's history where we all screamed, "There ought to be a law," before realizing exactly what we were asking for. Now, this is also coming from the era of big hair and shoulder pads. It's the story of something nurses affectionately nickname the bedpan pellet, commonly called supplemental vitamins to the rest of us. Now, before we get into the law, let's talk real quick about some simple medical science. Now, did you know that taking vitamins is usually as effective as wishing for more vitamins? Nutritional supplements, especially mineral supplements, aren't exactly easy for your body to break down and use. It usually prefers to get its nutrients through food, so most of these pills pass through the entire digestive tract unfazed by all the gastrointestinal nightmares of acid, mucus, and the assorted bacteria and enzymes that turn normal food into, well, the stuff that comes out after you eat. Look, nurses working in hospital usually find these supplement pills whole in bedpans of people that are bedridden and taking them, thus the nickname bedpan bullets or pan pellets for some nurses. Now, with that said, these supplements, though sometimes marketed as magic cures and others as essential vitamins not normally found in your food, that's a lie, by the way. They're essentially pills, right? Now, you would think that something little that looks like a pill is kind of taken like a medication with instructions like take 2 daily. It would be regulated by the same agency that regulates other little things that look like pills. You know, Lipitor, Viagra, right? Well, not so. Thanks to a letter writing campaign brought on by a celebrity spokesman-fueled public service awareness campaign, it brought in more letters than condemnation for the Vietnam War to Congress. Now, what were these celebs and normal Joes upset about so much that they jammed the phone lines at the White House for weeks? After finding out that some substances were not what they claimed to be in nutritional supplements and others not being labeled properly as to reflect their completely bogus medical claims, the Federal Drug Administration set out to take over and regulate the nutritional supplement marketplace with practices and standards that they reserve for Big Pharma. This did not end well. Now, at first, Congress proposed the Nutritional Advertising Coordination Act of 1991. This would have tightened the regulations regarding supplemental labeling. Now, in response to the bill, many health food companies began lobbying the government to vote down the laws and even went as far to tell the public that the FDA would ban their dietary supplements, like vitamins. A huge battle took place. Those phone calls and letters were heard, and much to the surprise of no one, the Federal Drug Administration was not allowed oversight over the supplemental industry. Now, in turn, that industry went from making $4 billion per year in the mid-90s to a whopping $38 billion just 2 years ago. Oh, and since that time that we passed that little law, countless miracle cures and essential minerals, and nutritional supplements have been found to be linked to things like strokes, early onset diabetes, heart failure, and more than a dozen deaths. And you would think that there would have been a law to prevent something like this from happening, right? It's just too bad we already used the "there ought to be a law" to say things that look like pills and recommended for pill-like uses shouldn't be regulated by the one agency responsible for that sort of thing. Now, whatever the reason, America went dumb when it came to a pill-like non-pill thing, and we have the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. Now, instead of protecting the population of America, Congress chose to side completely with the supplement industry, thus putting everyone that takes supplements at a greater risk and thus not protecting the health of American citizens, which is the exact reason that this law was proposed in the first place. Supposedly. It could have just been some major lobbying money collected by two guys who co-wrote the law, Senator Orrin Hatch and Senator Tom Harkin. Now, this is proof positive that things started in good faith can go dumb, right? Absolutely. If there's a way America can find it, it's what we do. And join me next time as we batten down the hatches and sail headlong again into all things dumb in America.
KAKU.
Gesundheit.
What?
What? Gesundheit. You sneeze, so I said Gesundheit.
I didn't sneeze. I said KAKU.
God bless you.
Stop that.
What?
I'm not sneezing. I'm trying to tell you about Maui Community Media, or KAKU. It's this great place on Maui where you can inexpensively learn the art of shooting and editing video, learn how to work in a TV studio and in the field, and after you do, you can check out a camera and lighting and sound equipment to use for free. And when you're done, they'll run it for you on TV. And that is nothing to sneeze at.
Oh, yeah, KAKU. Very cool.
Well, if you knew what I meant, why?
I couldn't understand what you were saying. You were sneezing so much.
For more information on how you can learn to shoot and edit and screen your own videos, call Maui Community Media at 871-5554 or go online at akaku.org and create for yourself what Akaku is.
God bless you.
Oh, God, I love that commercial. Yeah. It's 88.5 and Channel 55. Of course, you're watching KAKU Live. My guest today, Cindy Paulos. And before we get ready to wrap up the show, can we talk about the new thing that you've got going on? I mean,
Yes.
every other week you're writing a book, you're putting out a CD. You know, what's now?
It's taken me 2 years. I have a new CD coming out with 40 amazing tracks with Grammy Award-winning producers and wonderful artists throughout the entire country. And it's called Angel Blessings, and angelblessingscd.com has more information on it. It's going to be out Friday. Yay! It's finally going to ship Friday, and CD Baby is going to have it, and I'm going to actually have discs as well. And it's awesome. It's the cream of the creme la creme, the very, very, very best of all my messages that relate to helping people to understand comfort if they've lost a loved one, or that the ways to connect with their soul, to know that their spirit goes on. So these are really inspirational messages, and with the music, which is just heavenly, from people like George Kamoko and some Grammy Award-winning people like Ricky Kej and my friend Gregor Pregt from Europe. Amazing music. Laura Sullivan, who won Best New Age Grammy last year. Great music and great spoken word, some by me and some from other people around the world. Wayne Dyer did 2 tracks. So it's really great. This is the best I've ever done yet. I'm really excited about this one. And the book will be out in a week or two. I'm going to put it up to Book Baby. And the book has about 300 of those messages, including all kinds of subjects to help you out, like how to connect with your soul, to using light and to love, forgiveness, ways to release the past, really ways to get totally clear. And that one's called also Angel Blessings, Messages from Heaven. And that'll be angelblessingsbook.com. And this is really the latest. It's been a lot of work. I mean, working 18-hour days and juggling that with the radio and everything. And then, I have the metaphysic radio situation. I've started a nonprofit, Metaphysical Media Network, metaphysicalmedianetwork.com, and there's a 24/7 New Age radio station there. I don't get to rest my time. But
I was going to ask you, exactly when do you sleep?
After, I get up early in the morning, as you know, 4 or 5 o'clock, and meditate, and that gets you a long ways. And I try to, except for today, go up to Eau Valley and walk in the afternoon, and that's my wonderful reward, the meditation and walking, and then getting out something that may help someone, and working with wonderful people like you and the people on the CD. They've been my angel team, and they all volunteered. And all the profits are going to go to hospice. All the profits from the CD are going to hospice, and everyone volunteered their efforts for this CD. So it's the most exciting project yet. I'm really, next time we come back, I'll have a copy, and I'll give it to you within a couple weeks.
And then that's just it, because we didn't get to touch on the meditation stuff that I really wanted to get into.
Oh, yeah, I know. There wasn't enough time. Well, it's a lifetime trying to squeeze it into an hour. It's hard, When you get to my age, it's a lot of years to squeeze in an hour, right?
Oh, God. Well, I'm going to go ahead and, make the unofficial author. You've been on television. You've been in radio. Joe, Queen of Media. Is that a good title?
Queen of Media.
All right. We are going with Queen of Media.
I like that. Can I be Priestess of Media?
Priestess.
I like Priestess.
Oh.
Okay, great.
He's got Priestess down.
Well, and it's wonderful. I get to meet people like Joel and you and the wonderful people at KAKU. I mean, they're a great, great crew, and all the staff at Kauai Radio and John cadets and all the people behind the scenes sometimes. People don't get to see the people behind the scenes, but you work with the volunteers and the people. Yeah. And you're going to get a chance to talk to a wonderful lady, Nona Brown. In a couple days, she's visiting here, and she's someone I met through the Grammy Association. She's vice president of the Grammys in San Francisco, so people look forward to that Friday.
No. Well, join us Friday, but now we gotta go.
Okay.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
For every